everybody, this is Tyler once again from the Character Workshop, and here we are, going to be talking about the first story of Season 2 of Classic Doctor Who, also known as story number 9, I guess. So, we're going to be looking at Planet of the Giants today. So the story starts off with the main crew inside the TARDIS, and the TARDIS all of a sudden starts malfunctioning, but even with all those things to worry about, the fall locator shows that, nothing is wrong and it's okay to go outside of wherever they went. So everybody then goes out and then they explore wherever they're at, and while they're doing so, they find the remains of a giant earthworm and an ant, which have all appear to be dead. And eventually, as soon as they continue searching and thinking, everybody realizes that they have indeed returned to Earth, but rather than everything becoming giants as they originally thought, they have become smaller. So basically they're about an inch tall, basically. And while they were further investigating, Ian goes off and goes inside an empty matchbox, but is then later picked up by a scientist by the name of Pharaoh, who of course was visiting an industrialist by the name of Forrester, to tell him about this new insecticide called DN6, which have been rejected as of far from being too deadly to all forms of insect life. And then of course news of this, then prompts Forrester to shoot Pharaoh because of it. And then, the Dr. Barbara and Susan then hear the gunshot, and then they head for the house to, find Ian, who is, right near where Pharaoh died. Meanwhile, another guy who is helping out Forrest by the name Smithers arrives to the place and doesn't report the murder of Pharaoh to anybody because, he's worried about, the DN6 production not going underway since, he was fully dedicated to the project. And then Ian and Barbara eventually get into the house inside of Pharaoh's briefcase to avoid being stepped on by the other two guys. And of course they got separated from the Doctor and Susan, and they were brought inside the house. Meanwhile, with the Doctor and Susan, they climb up a drain pipe to try and get to Ian and Barbara. Forrester, in the meantime, alters Pharaoh's reports and, gives support to the DN6 license, and was pretending to, be Pharaoh in the process by making a phone call to the Ministry. But of course, this is overheard by the local telephone operator of there by the name of Hilda, and of course her husband, who happens to be a policeman by the name of Bert, who suspect that something's up. While they were inside the house, Ian and Barbara find a giant fly which happened to be killed when it contacted the seeds that have been sprayed with by the DN6 formula. Barbara unknowingly touched one of the seeds and starts to begin feeling ill. And as soon as they're reunited with the Doctor and Susan, the Doctor realizes that the toxicity of DN6, and, contaminated Barbara, might end up being fatal for her. So then they try to alert somebody by going up to the telephone receiver, but of course they cannot make themselves heard since they were all so small. And meanwhile, during the telephone exchange, Hilda and Bert, who are still on the other line, become increasingly concerned about what's going on there. Bert then heads off to the house to investigate what was going on. So then, the Doctor and everybody else then decides, the best way to get people's attention is by starting a fire. So they did this by maneuvering an aerosol can into the flames of a Bunsen burner gas outlet. And meanwhile, while this is happening, Smithers discovers, the true, virulence of, the DN6 formula and demands Forrester to cease the application. And in the lab, the bomb that the Doctor and everybody else sets off and gets in Forrester's face as the cop then shows up to then arrest Forrester. Everybody eventually gets back into the TARDIS, and the Doctor succeeds in returning the TARDIS and everybody else to normal size, which of course cures Barbara from her infection of the DN6 formula. So that was basically the plot of Planet of the Giants. short and sweet to the point, just like what happened to the Doctor and his crew in this story. So what did I think about it? I thought it was decent. I didn't think it was super amazing or anything, but it's definitely, quite a easy watch. And especially for only being like a 3-part story, that's something I never mentioned at all in this episode. This was only like a 3-episode story. Now, from what I remember, this was originally written and filmed as a 4-part story, but of course it was later introduced as, a 3-parter instead. So basically what ended up being the original 3rd and 4th episodes of this story were cut down to be 1/3 episode to, have a more fast-paced climax. And I don't know. So something I've also realized, while kind of looking through the back of the DVD case that I have for the story, apparently what was originally supposed to be like the 3rd and 4th episodes of the story were actually kind of reconstructed, with newly recorded dialogue and animation based on, of course, the original scripts from that episode. But I never saw that version, so obviously I didn't know, like, if it worked better or if it didn't work as well. But, I don't know, personally for me, I did think this story worked a little bit better as a 3-parter, but that's just my opinion. For the story itself, I definitely think it's pretty unique compared to what we've had, before in Doctor Who at this point. We never had an episode where the Doctor and his crew were actually, shrunk down, were affected by, something. I don't know that they ever really, explained, like, how they got shrunk, but it just happened. But, yeah, that was definitely really interesting. And also, the fact that they were, like, this was, like, the first, Doctor Who story where they were set on, contemporary Earth, besides the first episode of Unearthly Child. So, I mean, that's definitely some of the more interesting things about the story. It also has some really nice set designs, especially, considering the time period that this story came out in. Definitely looked really interesting. I especially liked the giant fly that Ian and Barbara encountered, during what was it? I believe it was either the 2nd episode or the 3rd episode. But, yeah, that was really cool. The characters in here, were pretty well, except for Susan, as always. She's kind of back to being, like, the overly scared, worrying type of person, which, everybody loves. And some of the other characters in this story were actually pretty interesting as well. Even though, obviously, we never had a chance to, like, really find out about Pharaoh that much. Forrester, however, was, we definitely kind of got, like, a feeling of what his character is just right off the bat in the first episode, immediately shoots, Pharaoh, which kind of gives you the impression that, like, Forrester's, like, not really the kind of person that you gotta cross with, I guess. And also, Smithers, was another really interesting character, being, he's definitely his character is kind of more interesting because, he was, like, all on board about having this whole DN6, insecticide being made, an insecticide that's, like, able to kill, like, any kind of insect, regardless of whether they're a pest or not. But, of course, eventually, by the end of the story, he finds out how not so great of an idea it is, and tries to stop it, it's definitely almost like, kind of like one of those Frankenstein kind of situations, like creating something and then realizing you just kind of screwed everything up and trying to fix it. I definitely liked that. Few minor nitpicks I gotta say about Planet of the Giants, and these are of course very minor, but in episode 1 there was a cat that lived by the house, and at the end of part 1 there was a cliffhanger that, like, looked like the cat was gonna, like, try to attack the Doctor and the crew, but, like, by the beginning of episode 2 that ended up not happening. So yeah, expect a lot of cliffhangers like that in classic Who, but yeah, nothing came about the cat. Like, the cat was kind of like, probably the most unnecessary, like, parts of the story. That That's one minor nitpick, and another nitpick was kind of more of on a production standpoint, but there was like, I believe an episode, might have been episode 2, maybe it's episode 1, I don't remember. It was definitely still kind of early middle part of the story where Ian discovers that Pharaoh is dead, and you can like clearly see, when you watch the story that it's literally just like, William Russell, Ian's actor, in like some sort of studio, and like some sort of image of Pharaoh looking all dead in the background. It's definitely, pretty obvious when you watch it nowadays, although probably people back in the day didn't notice that, but those are like the only minor nitpicks about the story. But other than that, I kind of enjoy Planet of the Giants. Definitely not as interesting as some other stories we talked about, like the Aztecs and the Reign of Terror, but it's definitely, I would say, for being an opener for a new season, it's definitely a little more interesting than Unearthly Child, so I will give Planet of the Giants that, and just for those reasons alone, I'm going to give this story a rating of 7.5 out of 10. But that's going to be about it for my review and discussion of Planet of the Giants. Oh, sorry, Planet of Giants. I keep forgetting there's no "the" in the title, but that's about it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more episodes of A Came from England, or just mediocre plush content in general. Also, be sure to turn on the notification bell so you get notified each time I upload a new video, whether it's this show or any other show. Leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. That's about it. This is Todd from the Character Workshop, signing out. Next episode, we're going to be going back into the world of Mr. Men, but rather than just talking about the shows or books themselves, we're going to be ranking all the narrators from worst to best. Something I don't think anybody else has done until now.